Well, hello. Well, hello. We're back.
Hello,
What
hello,
did what did
hello.
John what did John Wick say? Yeah, I guess I'm back.
Well, hello.
I guess I'm back. Hold on one second. I got a little bit of feedback here. Um, everybody, welcome again to Pencil, your favorite pandemic podcast. I'm Jamar Nicholas, jo- joined as always by my good bud and master cartoonist Mike Manley. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, everybody. What are we going to say when we're no longer pandemic? We'll just have to come up with another.
Well,
We're no longer,
I'm good for it. I'll think of something.
you know.
Um, so welcome all you guys. For anybody that's new to the podcast, this is a art and creativity podcast where cartoonists, myself, Jamar Nicholas, Mike Manley, and our third co-host and brother Bret Blevins uh, come to you every Wednesday and Saturday evening with interviews with other comic book, illustration, animation creatives. We basically talk shop. Consider this a fly on the wall style podcast.
Oh, look at that. We're all using pencils.
I have a pin.
Oh,
I got fired.
you got fired.
Yeah, so consider this a fly on the wall style podcast where if you've ever wondered what a bunch of cartoonists talk about when they're on the phone, here it is. But what's super cool about you guys watching live is that you get to interact with us. So if you are watching on Facebook or watching on YouTube, why don't you go ahead and type in the chat room in the comments, and then I will see it. If you have questions for us or for a guest, please type them in some sort of coherent sentence so I can put it on screen. But also know that I can't guarantee I'll get to everything. We're going to start a flow conversation. If it works its way in, cool. If it doesn't, no tears. Okay, we're just going to have a good time. Mike, how you doing, bro?
We do
Mike.
go back after the. You can see Comcast is being choppy tonight. We do go back after and answer questions that we
Yeah.
don't always get to during the podcast. So, and we also have a new sponsor tonight.
Woo, 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 woo. Where is it? It's over there. It's over top of you, Mike.
There,
There we go. Yeah, do you want to talk about our new sponsor on top of our other sponsor?
So we have a new sponsor, which is Tomorrow's Publishing, who is the publisher of Draw Magazine, as well as just a cornucopia of other magazines and books related to the history and hobby of comics, from the Kirby collector to the comic book artist to alter ego. Just there's so many books that they publish. They're great books. And they're always having some kind of special. So if you go over to tomorrows.com, you can get digital editions of almost all the magazines, including like Lego, Brick Journal, and Draw. And they also offer a lot of deals on bundles if you want to buy all of them or buy a bunch at one time. So we're happy to have them as a brand new sponsor.
Yeah, I'm very excited. And they're also doing a half off special right now. So if you go to graphicsly.com, you'll be able to check that out, and we'll give you some more information as we're going along. All right. So I don't want to keep our guest waiting any longer. He's been very patient in the green room, and I think he might have eaten all the green M&Ms out of the bowl. So I want to get started. So I've been a fan of his for a very long time, and as we were talking a little bit before we went on air, I think all three of us have probably crossed paths a lot further back than we all realized. This person is a master cartoonist, also an editor, illustrator, designer, and New York Times best-selling author. I'm going to bring him in now. KAZU KIBUISHI. I'm very excited to have him hang out with us for a while. And if you guys have any questions for him, just line them up and let's get started. Hey KAZU, how are you?
Hey, you guys.
Hey,
Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Uh, oh,
I'm already
thanks. Let
having
me get
fun.
let me get rid of some of these objects on the screen.
All right.
So, KAZU, what's on your plate right now? What are you working on right this second?
Right the second. I mean, just 15 minutes ago, I was working on Amulet 9. So that's been on my plate for the last couple of years, trying to complete a 9-book series. This is the first time I've done that.
It's a
I don't
lot.
think I'm gonna
Right?
get. Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get too many chances to do this. So I want to do this right.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, it's been going well. I think the book looks like it's gonna be I don't know, hopefully exciting, and I think that the readers will enjoy it. So I just want to make sure that I put in as much effort as I can, as much
sure.
thought as I can, because I'm not going to be able to go back and do this again for a long time. You know, uh,
well, there's you after you finish this, do you have another idea for a series you're cooking now?
I've had
For
another series idea waiting in the wings since before I started Amulet as a published book. It was the second series that I was developing while I was in college. So I had two projects, and Amulet was the practice one. So Amulet was my my trial to see if I can figure out how to make a graphic novel. So Amulet, the Stonekeeper, the first volume was actually the oh hey Jerry, um, the Amulet, the Stonekeeper was technically my first graphic novel because Daisy Cutter was a series of comics that was republished as a graphic novel, and so Amulet has been my big experiment in seeing if I could do a whole book at once, or if it's something that's even enjoyable to do, or you can do it on a regular basis. This is something I think we can get into a discussion about that because I think that's one of the biggest hurdles for a comic artist is trying to do the whole thing at once.
oh yeah,
Because
yeah.
yeah, and so so yeah, so right now I am now completing my very first major, you know, graphic novel work, and then the second one is going to be very similar to Amulet, and it's like a it's like a it's very much related. When you guys see it eventually, it'll just make sense.
Right, right.
Hi
Now,
Tracy.
now,
I
what?
know the people coming in here.
This is your crew. I love it.
Right,
Yeah, this is
right.
just friends. We're just saying, hey, hello everybody.
So
I'm
would you?
sure my mom's in there too, so she comments. I'll see that on there. We'll get to say hi to my mom.
Did you uh alter your? I mean, you one of the things you said is very true. Is there's that process or step you go through from drawing what you like, when you like, how long you like, right?
Yeah.
When you start out to then having to have a production schedule, which
Mm.
forces you to work more than was comfortable in the old days. So did you change
Yeah.
your process or how you pace things from say like the first couple books to this book now? Do you have a different way of pacing your creative process?
Yeah. So the first book was basically a disaster all the way through as I was making it. And it was just the whole thing was like trying to rescue the project, from itself. Like it was basically falling apart the whole time, and
Mm,
I couldn't figure. I mean, I think that this is how a lot of major big projects happen. If you find out about how they made the Lord of the Rings movies or Star Wars,
yeah.
the stories are pretty much the same, right? Or any James Cameron movie. It's inevitably you have a point where everyone thinks this is the biggest disaster, a huge fiasco, everything's terrible. Well, we had that on Amulet One.
Mm,
I was, I I thought had no idea what I was doing, um, and every time I take a step forward in my storytelling process and the way I want to do the book, if I want to take a big risk, I find myself in that really uncomfortable position every time that happens, and those are almost always the best books. The ones where I've done that, and I actually don't know how good the book is until years after I've done it, because it'll take time for it to process in the world once it's out there and people
yeah.
actually read it. we can guess as far as like what is good or what is going to be popular, but we really don't know with a book for, I'd say, about 10 years that if someone had made something that was worth leaving on the shelf, I guess is what
and
I'm
people
saying.
so people keep returning to it, or new people are discovering it, or it's getting recommended.
Yeah. So I think I've gotten better at trying to figure out what stays on the shelf longer over the years. So and so when we were doing comics like in a single issue format or something like that, you're kind of working for the moment a little more, and there's something that's it's a little bit easier about that because you're reacting. You're being reactive. You can take notes from people who just read the previous issue, then you go into the next issue, and you kind of already have some fuel to move into the next one. When you're doing a graphic novel, you got to think so far in advance, because by the time people are actually have processed it and have read it, and let's say a year after a book has been out, it's probably already been about 2 years or 2 to 3 years since you've finished that book. So you're so far removed from it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, when you're doing a graphic novel. So this is
Right.
what I'm talking about. It's because if you're working on the schedule of a book publisher, it's that you do the book a year in advance. You got to be complete, and then it takes a year for them to go through the process of printing, promoting, preparing a marketing plan, preparing to figure out where it goes or who wants it. And at first, it was really, really hard for me. It was really hard for me to have that, because it felt like I had no fuel going into the next book.
And
I'd do the first
right,
book.
right. Like, what was your feedback only coming from your editor at that point, right? Or people you were given before it came out, right?
Yeah, because like all of my editors have been only supportive, so I've only gotten positive feedback for the most part, and so I don't know. It's such a closed bubble. Like my network is a small group. It's really just Amy and me most of the time. My wife Amy is actually in here in the studio working on her graphic novel series too. So yeah, I mean, I've gotten more and more comfortable with the idea that people won't know what I've done for about 5 years. It used to be I had to know within a year or two. And after a while, it became 3, 4, or 5 years. Now I'm thinking in terms of 10 years.
Oh, really?
So when AMULET 8 came out, like I think it hasn't processed yet. I don't think people understand it. So I when I read reviews, I kind of don't read reviews. If I read reviews, I read it with the perspective that somebody is reading it within year one of before it's like matured. The book isn't matured yet, and so they're reading it first read. It's like a first reaction.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of years, maybe they'll hear some students read the books and say something that they didn't think about and go, "Oh man, let me take a look back at that book." Maybe it's got something more than I thought. Like, 'cause, that first read is really a reflection, not so much of the book, but a reflection of what the reader has brought to the book, like their perception of what they were looking to read. And I often get pretty poor. If people are super amped up about one of my books, they'll probably get a little bit disappointed when they read my book, because I'm always intending to change gears. I want them to go into the book thinking one thing and come out of the book thinking something else. And I think that can inspire empathy, and I think that's my ultimate goal, is to inspire the act of empathizing with something different, someone else, somebody other than you. Put yourself in another person's shoes. The only way you'd be able to do it is to be surprised. And my favorite movies are the ones favorite movies and favorite books are the ones where I come into it with one perspective and I come out of it with a new one. And if I've grown through that, then I value that work of art, and I keep it with me as often as I can to remind myself of what that process could be like. So, yeah.
But you weren't thinking.
I'm going way off the road here.
No.
I just want to say I did. So I got your guys' books here too. So
been checked in the mail.
Yeah. So hey, Jamar, you said that I got the very first copy.
Yeah.
This is the very first one.
Yeah, KAZU was the very first person to pick up one of my books when it debuted at Baltimore Comic Con.
Oh man,
That's
27.
that's wild.
Yeah, I was like, man, where did Leon go? You know, like, because I was looking for the book, and I had to check with my son because he was the one who was reading it all the time, and he's like, yeah, I don't know, where is Leon? And we found it. It was top shelf, number one, first book
Oh, that's
on his
great.
bookshelf.
At
Yeah.
least it was. At least it wasn't like evening out the dining room table. That's good to know.
No, no, it was the very first book in his bookshelf. I wanted to let you know that that's where I found it. It was at the top shelf.
Oh
So
wow, that
that
means
was
a
that was
lot.
pretty cool.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
thank him. It's not me. That's that's Junie, and this is cool too. I like this.
yeah, that's we've been talking a lot about Draw Magazine lately because our publisher Tomorrow's is on. They're hitting the flashing red light right now, so we're trying to do our best to support.
Yeah,
Um,
I just did a podcast with John yesterday, and the good news is because of the fandom, they're doing okay, but
Good.
we still need
Yeah,
people to
that's good.
go. But yeah, all the small publishers are going through that right now. I mean, it's really difficult. But I wanted to go touching on what you were discussing
Yeah, yeah. Let's go back to that.
now that you didn't know any of this, probably your first book or two, right? This is something that you have
Yeah, I
come to
didn't.
know,
Well,
several books into it, right? So was there a struggle between the first couple books? Do you get stuck for motivation, or you feel like you're treading water sometimes, or
um,
in the creative
honestly, guys,
process?
yeah, honestly, guys, every time I've gone to try to make comics, I kind of didn't want to do it. Just didn't want. I didn't enjoy the process. This is why I knew that I was set. I was like key. Like I was a good fit for comics,
mhm.
and the reason why is that I did it so much, and I was really good at it at a young age, and I didn't like doing it.
Mm.
Because
Why didn't you like doing it?
why didn't I like? I don't know. I didn't enjoy it so much. I just knew that I could do it. So everyone kept asking me to do it, and so
Mm.
I would just do it, and I just got it done. And so I honestly started because my friends were drawing comics, and I just wanted to hang out with my friends.
Mm.
And I wasn't the best, I was always, third best. Almost always like number three, number
Mhm.
3 or 4 guy. And I liked that. That was really nice. I liked being part of a crew where I looked up to people and
Mhm.
just hung out. And then, and like none of those people, almost none of them still do this. And it's kind of a bummer for me
It's
to
it's
think
it's
that.
it's a hard job. I mean, I think
Mhm.
that's a
Yeah.
very typical story for almost all of us who do comics. Is you start out and everybody takes off and everybody's flying, and every once in a while you look around and like, oh, that guy's not
Yeah.
gone. Then that other, because I think you really have to have. It's like 1% of people go on to do comics because you really have to have uh, that inward motivation. That's like super motivation
Mhm.
beyond, I think, a
Yeah.
lot of other jobs because unlike I know you worked in animation, so when you work in animation you work with a lot of other people. It's much more social. People are sending you stuff, you're doing your part.
Yeah.
It's a big machine, right? And you're like a piece of the machine, right? But when you're doing
Yeah.
comics, you can kind of like, it's like I said, it's like being the Maytag repairman. You're kind of like, and especially a graphic novel, because you're cooking it you're stuck in like what 2-3 years cooking this thing, right? So
Mhm.
it's not like somebody's calling you every day going, "Where are the pages? Where are the pages?" Right? So I think you really have to have that type of personality, the right kind of personality to do it. You know?
Yeah, what helps me is I look at a lot of I've studied a lot of film history,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I think that's helped me quite a bit because I a lot of my favorite movies were disliked when they came out or didn't do well business
Mhm.
wise. I mean, I think a lot of the great classics that we often talk about were like that. And I was trying to figure out, as a kid, trying to figure out why that was, um, and I think that the issue was that in film things have such a short shelf life, or there's a perception of a short shelf life. So you want to create something that is for the moment. Yet our greatest works of cinema are the ones that were not so well liked in the moment and processed over the time. When people look back on it, they saw something really, really great about it, so they continue to celebrate it. What's awesome about our slow pace and the painfully slow pace of making graphic novels is that it gives you time to process the book itself. Like, you're actually working for a long time, and you really shouldn't try to chase anything. Like, try to do something that was of the moment, because you'll be way late to the party, no matter what. But if you with that slow pace, I don't know, you're kind of taken out of the stream of information, whether it's the social media stuff and like things that are popular. You're taken out of the stream. So if you think you're always constantly knowing that you're not in the stream, it kind of protects you as an artist and a writer. You can make the content that can last a long time, because you're not in the just amongst the noise.
Yeah.
So being a film history, like, I was a film studies major, and I studied a lot of film history, and that was really, it was really interesting to see that happen to the great works of cinema. And then on another hand, as a film studies major, I was studying to pitch movies and write the scripts and direct, because I was going to write and direct live action. That was my focus. And so I was getting, ready to do that in Hollywood, which I did when I was doing a Disney movie. I did learn how to pitch. I got taught how to do it, everything. But you can't create literature in the pitch. It's really, really hard. It's hard to make. There's a reason why Marvel, like Disney, makes movies off of Marvel Comics, because the comics had time to process.
Right.
And it had culture and had ideas, and it also brings people together. It's already brought people together. So because most people can't even read a screenplay. They're really hard to read, right? They're just, you got to, it's like a whole nother language. You got to know exactly why a particular script is good. Usually the best scripts are the ones where it's kind of like winking at you, and like it's like one script reader to another script reader saying, yeah, I know this is boring stuff, but here's how I'm going to make it more fun for you to read. And those are the scripts that end up getting pushed through, just clever scripts, not necessarily literature. But if something like a comic book has been around for, say, 50 years, and people can access the comic book and they can read it, and then everyone, even if they look at the script and they can't tell what's going on in the script, they at least get a sense of what they're making. So if they're making a Spider-Man movie, it's pretty easy for the whole crew, all the way from the actors, the director, all the way down to just the gaffer,
right?
The focus puller. The focus puller knows what the story's about, because he knows he's working on she or he knows they're working on a Spider-Man movie. And I think that the comic had provided that connection in a way that clarifies the goal.
Yeah.
So, and so I was noticing that when I was in film, it was really hard for me to clarify the goal. Especially when I was 22. I think I was 22 when I had a Disney movie. So I was, and when I walked in I was like 23 maybe, and I walked in the doors at Disney, and people looked at me like I was there to bring coffee.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody would look at me like a 23-year-old version of me and think that I was directing a feature film. It was hilarious. I mean, honestly, I just listened to everybody lecture me on how to make my movie, and I just realized that this is just going to be hard. I've got to go somewhere else, and I've got to go to a quiet place that no one else really is looking at. And so comics was naturally at that point very appealing to me, because I thought, well, everyone thinks it's really they undervalue it. That's how I felt. Like, they undervalue the strength of comics. I think comics can provide the basis for everything they make here in Hollywood. Yet, they think of it as garbage at the time. This is like back in the early 2000s. That has changed now, right? Clearly has changed the perspective of that. I got into comics partly because of that, because I wanted to get out to the audience as quickly, as purely as possible. Without
So what comics What comics were you reading then? Were you always reading comics?
Well, I mean, let's see. I mean, I'm always. I mean, I would always reference Bone, of course, by Jeff Smith.
Right.
But you know, and Stansakai is Usagi Yojimbo and Gru. I mean, the classics, you know, for the American comics. But I was also reading this. You know, this is Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind, by Hayao Miyazaki. And this is the box that I bought when I was in college, and it's a little bit beat up now. But I read this many times, and my goal was to try to make something like this. And knowing that Miyazaki was also probably the most successful filmmaker in Japanese history, on top of all of this, on top of being able to make a graphic novel, was really motivating to me. I just felt like, I didn't have to throw away like my big film career or anything like that, you know, and still do. I could still make something popular and also make something like this. What I was surprised by is the fact that the Amulet would go on to sell well enough that it could be my entire career. Like that Nausicaa, I don't know. I don't really feel that. I mean, for Miyazaki, this is just like a drop in the bucket. I imagine for where his income and what he thinks, he's not living off of this. This is something he did out of passion, and that's what I expected to do. I thought I was going to do this, and I was going to be directing movies. And that was the plan. But once I started doing Amulet and seeing how you could make a road, make inroads into the publishing world as a traditional published author, and how that life would allow me to have time with my kids and my wife and my family, just life stuff, and seeing how I think if I look at Miyazaki's work and I'm so in awe of it, and I'm a huge fan of his work. But as a father, I wish he had spent more time with his son. I think a lot of people might make that criticism, and that's something that for me, because I didn't have like my real dad around when I was a kid. My brother and I are kind of the dads in our family from a very young age. I think being a pretty present dad was a huge part of what I wanted with my life. So being a comic book artist full time seemed like it was a really good way for me to be able to spend time with the family.
Oh yeah, because if you were making a film, you would be like you'd be gone all the time, or just like cooked by the time you probably came home.
Yeah.
Oh hey, but I'm sorry, KAZU, before you go into the next thing. A question from the room that kind of goes back to what you were just talking about. CAE Productions wants to know, what Disney movie were you the head of at that point?
It was a movie called Let's Get Francis, and it was never made. I was, as somebody who's also studied film history, I was trying to tell my partners on the production, a group called Shaded Box Animations, that we were kind of brought in from the outside to come in to make this movie. And I told them, like, I don't think we're gonna get to make this movie, man. I was like, and then they're like, no, they said, yeah, it's all gonna be good, and we're just gonna, we got the green light. And I was like, I don't know, man. I was just kind of looking at these, it's like watching, because I talked to the kids at schools about this too, because they think it's hilarious. I was walking the halls of Disney. And I was being guided through all the boards that they had on the wall. And at the time, one of the ones that they had was it was Chris Sanders' film. You guys know Chris, right? Do you know Chris? He was on the drawing board. Yeah. So Chris Sanders was directing American Dog at the time, and I think I don't know what happened there, where he got taken off the project and he went on to DreamWorks to do How to Train Your Dragon. But Chris Sanders, the director, for those who don't know, is the director of Lilo and Stitch, and he made American Dog. It would years later turn into Bolt, and I saw Rapunzel up on the walls as well, and that was Glenn Keane's project, and that was like still in the works. This is early 2000s for a long time, so it would eventually become Tangled. But I imagine that the process of making that movie probably started in the 80s or 90s, and eventually it would be made, and not by Glenn Keane, 20 years later. And then you got stuff like the Snow Queen, which was one of Disney's last projects, Walt Disney, before he passed away, and would eventually be Frozen, but it took over 50 years.
Yeah.
So watching all that happen, I just knew that, okay, well, I'm just going to get in this line of projects that will probably not be seen for like 20 or 30, 40, 50 years. And I just thought, I need to see if I know how to do this first.
Yeah.
I can't wait for 50 years for a movie to be made. So I actually just signed the rights away to this movie, and I just told everybody around me. I said, look, they're not going to let us make this thing. I got to move on.
Yeah.
And they said, no, it's happening. I said, okay, if you believe that, I'll give it to you. So I gave it to my producing partners. I said, it's yours. I wrote the story. It was actually based on my brother and me. And I said, if you guys think you can do it, then good luck, man. It's all you. So I signed the rights away, and then I started working on Amulet as a graphic novel after that, because I just knew that I can't let Amulet get stuck in something like that.
It can be very frustrating. I mean, I pitch stuff myself. I have friends, that work in the business, and I'm always amazed by some of them who go through. Seems like they're constantly pitching, and that's a whole different mindset to get into, constantly going in. And I remember I did it a little bit myself, and then it's a very different way, because you have to pitch that person you're pitching to, then has to go pitch it to another person, who then has to go pitch it to another person, and then somebody goes, okay, here's all these things, and we've all whittled it down to these couple of things, and then you get your deal, and then maybe they say, you know what, put a lot of extra garlic on it. Okay, and you put a bunch of extra garlic on it, and then they go, that tastes terrible. Why did you bring me this terrible tasting thing to me? But you said that no. We don't like garlic here at Acme Pictures Incorporated. I think you really have to have that type of personality that can last, like you said, years. I mean, you read that a long time, and we just talked with our buddy Andy Parks a couple of weeks ago, who
Andy.
Yeah. So so his okay.
We'll talk after this.
Okay. So anyway, the film's on Netflix, but it took like 12 years.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's common. That's a common story.
Right.
Yeah,
right. You get the actor, but then the director leaves.
To be fair, they're putting a lot of money in these things, you know, and that's a lot of risk. That's a tremendous amount of risk for a very little reward, honestly. Because if you're producing movies for theatrical, if they don't have, say, merchandise and ancillary money coming in from the movie, I mean, it's basically just a giant ad, because there's really not much. There isn't that much money in the end, even if the movie makes a lot of money, because there's so many different, things that it has to. So many different gateways to get to the consumer.
That's why there's Frozen everywhere. You go to the store and it's like, oh, I got some bananas, and there's a Elsa on my banana.
Yeah, I mean, there's, as they say, there's no net on a film, right? There's no profit margin, and that's actually, when you actually start looking into why that is, it sort of starts to make sense, because it is just like, it's just you have to burn so much in terms of time and resources for one of those things. So in order to make it make sense, it like, for a company like Disney, who can create ancillary merchandise off of it, it makes sense. So a movie that makes $1 billion is just covering itself.
Right. right.
And then that's that's where we're at with all that stuff. It's kind of nuts.
So did you come home that day and go, after giving it to your partners, and say, I'm gonna sit down and start pull out that paper and start drawing my graphic novel?
Well, I started with Daisy Cutter. I wanted to figure out
Okay.
how to do it first, so I did Daisy Cutter. I mean, honestly, I didn't. It wasn't. I would have stayed with the Disney project had my partners not come to me and asked me to stop drawing comics. Because that's what happened. There was an intervention because I was a company partner, so I had equity in the company. I was the creative. I was a co-creative director of the company, and so they called me. It was a kind of an all hands on deck meeting.
Wow.
I knew that was coming because I was doing Flight and Daisy Cutter at night at the studio. I was doing my Copper web comic and everything, and they saw all that going on, and they thought that's it looked like it was taking off in their minds. I didn't make $1 off it. I was just doing web comics. I didn't think that I could make a living doing that. I was just doing it for fun. But so they thought they asked me to stop, and I had already pulled together Flight, and in order to stop, I would have had to tell all those artists to go home, and I would have had to bail on that project, and there was just no way I was going to do that. So I quit my job as a creative director in an animation studio. I had saved a little bit of money, but I was living real cheap. And it was one of the best feeling decisions I've ever made. Honestly, it felt right. It just felt so what happened was they all came together and said, okay, here we need to talk. And they said, you got to choose. You got to choose. You got to choose those comics, or you got to choose what we're doing here. Make this movie with us. And so I said, okay. And they said, well, you know what? Why don't you take some time to think about it? Come back tomorrow, and we'll talk about it. And and I said, okay. So I went home. I called one of the partners who was like a very good friend of mine. He's the one who actually split his equity in the company with me. I didn't care for the equity in an animation studio. I mean, what do we own? The chairs? I don't know. I was like, I think it's. I understand. Like, I understand. It was a nice token, gift. But I knew that there isn't that much equity in a production studio. It's always in the properties, So So then I told him, I said, come on over and let's just chat. And he came over to my apartment, and he was looking really glum. He was looking bummed, because he's the one who like really pushed to have me a part of it, and I was kind of not super into the idea of being part of something like that, but I did it. I learned a lot. I don't regret it. I had a lot of fun, and so he came to my apartment. He was like, "You're leaving, aren't you?" And I was like, "Yep." I was like, "Yeah, I gotta go give this thing I gotta give this other thing another shot, or a shot." I'm still only in my 20s. I don't have a family yet. My overhead is really cheap. My risk is really good. I want to buy as much of my own risk as possible right now, because when I'm old and I'm like, falling apart, I'm riskier.
Right.
And I don't want to buy my old man risk. I want to buy my young man risk, That's the thing is I see a lot of these young artists going into the animation studios thinking like, oh, I'll do my own thing later when I'm old. I'm like, dude, that's going to be so expensive for you, man. You're falling apart. You need the job when you're older. When you're young, you don't. They need you. And you're willing to like give it away and just work like insane hours for an opportunity. Why wouldn't they buy that? It's super cheap, really good risk. That's what they're buying.
They
Not
bank
to say they're evil or anything.
No, but they bank off of young people. They bank off of young people's enthusiasm, and that's not something that you're really often conscious of when you're younger, when you start working, because your passion is what makes you want to do anything for a living, especially being an artist, right? It's not. Most people are not thinking, I'm going to do this because I'm making $1 million. Later on, you got a mortgage and everything else. Then you start thinking about stuff. But in the beginning, everybody's thinking like, I do this because I really love to. I want to draw Spider-Man, or I want to animate Bugs Bunny, or whatever it is that you want to do. And then usually, there's always some old guys going, hey, beware, kid. And like, oh, you don't know anything, Grandpa.
So I used to go to camps all the time. So, so it was like, Sergio, it was awesome, hanging out with Sergio Aragonis and Mort Walker was there all the time. Russ Heath was there like every time I was there. So I'm hanging out with all the old guard, and they were telling me those things like you're saying. But I would go to those things and I would listen, and I couldn't get any of my friends who were so enamored with the idea of working at DreamWorks and Disney. I could not get them to come with me. They just thought, oh, that sounds like an old bingo game thing. It sounds so boring. I was like, okay, it might be to you, but this is good information for you, okay? You're gonna see this is your ghost of Christmas future, my friend.
Yeah,
you can talk with these people, and they can give you good. There could be good ghosts and bad ones, too. But
right,
you can
bitter ghosts,
from your
happy
elders.
Ghosts, and bitter ghosts.
Yeah.
There's a lot of bitter ghosts.
Yeah, I remember because I was thinking, I always loved animation, and I originally was thinking of trying to go into animation right after high school. And I remember reading a magazine, and there was an ad in there. At that time in the early 80s, Hanna-Barbera still had a trainee program. And so I called the number, and there was this grizzled old guy answer the phone, and he goes, "You don't want to work in animation, kid. It's a crap business." And it's like,
that's not true.
Oh, okay. So, and I lived in Michigan, not California, so it would be a little bit more of an expensive chance to go out to California to find out if it really was a crap business. He sounded like that guy in Reservoir Dogs, the old tough guy. That's what he sounded like. But yeah, it's and again, I think one of the things that you know yourself now is after you do comics for a long time, you realize that there are certain people whose personality really fit. Like, guys like Charles Schultz could do Peanuts literally for decades. And almost no one can do that kind of a job where you do one thing for 40, 50, 60 years, and, that's comics is really, I think now, maybe besides being a musician, is really, or maybe sometimes a teacher, but you can do if you decided I wanted to keep doing any of your graphic novels, I want to come back and visit it, you can do that. You can't always do that as a musician. It's much harder because the styles of music change and things like that. The nature of the businesses change. But comics is so simple because it's like, some kind of drawing tool, some kind of paper, and you can put it online or whatever. So it's really kind of still pretty unique, and you can build a whole universe.
I agree with all of that. Yeah, and when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a professional baseball player.
Really,
I wanted to be an athlete, pro athlete, whatever it was, and so. But one of the things I did think about, even when I was a kid, I just thought, man, all these people retiring in their late 30s, early 40s. I thought,
it was
okay,
I got to retire now.
You got to become the best in the world, and then all of a sudden you got to switch gears like in a really short amount of time to become the best in the world at something else, whether it's broadcasting or coaching. You have to, or maybe somebody, you just go into real estate or sell cars, because right, that's what a lot of the athletes have to do. They just have to switch gears into a completely different career. I just think that I did think about that, and I thought, art would be a longer term thing. Like I won't be able to be like LeBron James in comics, because comics is slow in a way. It can happen, obviously. You can become a hugely successful comic artist and everything like that. But what's neat about it is I think that the real cartoonists that stick around are the ones who draw right till the day they're gone. That's the real deal, right? I did admire that. Miyazaki's just gonna die at the desk, I think. Just like Sparky did, right? It's pretty much what happened.
Mobius said that if he didn't draw every day, he could tell. It was like a really he could feel it himself if he was not working every day. And we're still seeing new drawings by him, and he's been dead several years now, and you're still seeing new work. So you realize that guy was like drawing probably 10, 12 hours a day, you know?
Yeah. So I got to spend some time with Mobius just before he passed away, and he was so excited about drawing and art, and it was so fun to see how enthusiastic he was about what the young artists were doing. He was so into it, and it's the same story you'll hear about Will Eisner and all this. I mean, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess you gotta. It just becomes your life, and you just do it until you expire.
Right. Right.
There aren't that many jobs out there where you don't retire from.
Well, I have
talking about.
I always find having conversations like this with other cartoonists really illuminating because I usually play the devil's advocate anytime we have a conversation, and I always ask questions. I wonder about like people who are, I call them civilians, people who don't do this kind of stuff for a living, can't really wrap their head around the idea that cartooning is more than a career. Like nobody's thinking about retirement plans or picking out golf clubs for later in their life. Like you just kind of do this till you drop dead. Have you ever had to have that conversation with anybody in your life about, well, so what about when you're 60? Like, well, then what are you going to do? Well, have you had any of those conversations?
I think early on with one of my accountants a long time ago was asking me about retirement. Like, okay, we're gonna put this away in your 401k, or or we're gonna put you.
Was he drawing a line that's going like this, or was he drawing a line that's going like that?
It was about like tax. I was like, we'll put this away in an IRA, and I was like, IRA? I don't know if I'm ever gonna retire though, man. It didn't register with him. He was like, what do you mean? I go, yeah, I don't know. I think I'm, like, for me, it was always the things that I would create. That was my retirement plan. It would just I think that what I make, hopefully, if I do if I do this right, it will live beyond me. And my kids will have to deal with it. I mean, they'll get the benefits, I'm sure, but they'll also have to, carry on its legacy in a sense. I see a lot of families that have to do that. We see that with the Schultz family and the Eisners. Everybody has to, do that once the material out there becomes part of the cultural lexicon. And I think Amulet's like kind of almost. I guess it's all pretty much. Is it there? I don't know. It's in the process of it happening. But I mean, you can do this for a long time, but I don't think about it like as a day-to-day job. I can retire. Like I'm only 42, I think. 42.
So you forgot already.
Starting to forget.
I mean, like technically, like if you did this well, you could retire even at this age. But I mean, I don't want to. There's no way. I'm just starting on a lot of things. This is Amulet was my practice run. But if you play it smart, I think if you work smartly, and you understand the value of the equity that you create, and you know how to invest in it and how to keep it alive, you can. I mean, it's not like what I'm trying to do is I don't want to create the perception that you have to be 90 years old to be successful at what we do.
Finally, I'm successful. Oh, my heart.
Yeah, because if you're making any kind of art, if you're making any kind of entertainment, you are an outlier if you succeed. Of the highest order, because you will be like the tiniest percentage of people who can do this type of thing, because the only reason people would pay to see you do it is because what you're doing is so extraordinary that they would pay for something seemingly as worthless as scribbles on a piece of paper. Like if you have the talent, or not, I don't know if talent is the right word. If you just have the whatever it is, that special gift of being able to communicate through scribbles, people will find the value in that, and they'll make sure that you're still there. They'll support you.
Right. So going back to your, you've had the meeting with your partners. You're like, okay, I'm done.
Oh yeah.
Did you have, and you did Daisy Cutter? Were you perfecting or changing your format and your way of breaking down stories? Was it like a hybrid of how you would pitch? Because like the pitch boards, was it a hybrid of that? Did you write it out visually as opposed to writing a script and then developing the script? Did you have a way of, and has that process changed over the course of the last, 3 or 4 graphic novels?
It's a good question. My process has changed. It changes every book. It evolves each time, for me to get the kind of results I'm looking for. But when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. And it wasn't, I don't know, what's a good way to put it? So even though I actually have a degree in film studies, and a lot of that was studying how to be a screenwriter, and I learned from some of the best in college at UC Santa Barbara. And I actually don't script my books. And the reason why I do that is because I always, even though I like scripts, I feel like the script kind of sells the book. But I always like the idea of just taking a camera and just jumping in and being able to, just navigate with what I know. And I think that that jazz performance type of improvisational, inspirational work, it's very rare to find stuff like that. Like, you can see it in music, and it happens sometimes on film. It's really rare because it requires so much organization. But if I have the opportunity to make that kind of thing happen, that create that X factor, where you just some bolt of lightning has come down, and you get this little bit of inspiration that has like nothing to do with anything you had planned to write before, but it's just there and you just go with it. Because I want to find those moments, and I think that's what my readers react to the most. I don't script anymore, even though I've done literal screenplays, even of my own work. It's unfortunate. I think I have to commend my editor, Cassandra, because she deals with this with me. Like, I will write a script if I'm making a movie because it mitigates the risk.
Right.
Because there's no way I'm going to shoot without a script. Just no way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wouldn't do it. But I can shoot without a script on a comic, and so if I can take that opportunity to explore and to get lost in it and to kind of just bungle around and just find something, whatever it is I'm looking for, I can find it, and I can be like a spelunker, and explorer. I will take it. So what I do is I don't write the whole book all at once. I just think about it as a journey that I'm going to take with my characters. They're my squad. I have my colorist, Jason Cafoe. Right now, Joey Hahn is an artist named Joey Hahn is helping us with the flats. So I have it's now just a team of us 3 right now on AMULET 9, and we're spelunking. We are now exploring, and we're just moving through and finding things that I couldn't have possibly scripted. And if I can find that, if I can get the point of discovery, if I can get the point of inspiration and discovery as close to the final as I can, like right when I draw it and set it down and color it, if I can get that point of discovery happening close to the late stages of the production, then I'm going to be able to express that sense of surprise and discovery to the reader in as fresh a way as I can. Because if it happened in my script notes early on, then everything's going to get watered down by the time it gets to the reader, and they're going to be like, "Oh, that was neat," and you're going to be like, "Oh, but it was such a good idea, but it was only good at that first stage." It was like when it's like food. You want to food prep is a lot of it is about timing. Like, when do you cook it? Like how do you what did you spend time preparing? If you're preparing, if you spend all the time cooking, then the food is going to be overcooked. But if you've spent all your time preparing for the meal and then cook it in a flash, some of that's the best stuff you're ever going to have, right? So, if you guys, I mean, I was supposed to make some burgers right now. That was a pretty good, that's it's perfect, right? Because like making burgers, it's all about like getting the cast iron skillet, making sure it's super hot, and it cooks in like a minute.
Right. And also to your point that nobody likes reheated French fries, so you have to eat it quickly.
Right. Well, you're talking about.
If you put them in an air fryer, it actually is not so bad.
Oh, okay. But Mobius was like that. Mobius was like Kirby was like that. I think that they were like right there doing, and if they didn't like it, they just tossed the page, and they did something. So they were right at the edge of their creativity. It was very live. I don't think it was because some artists have a process where there's this very long process from thinking of something and then working it out and then doing layouts and doing research. And there's a lot of different processes that process that you're doing may not totally go against the process of somebody else. They might like to dot all the I's and cross all the T's because that feels comfortable in their creative process. So I noticed, I think I saw on your Twitter that you had a stack of stuff that may not make it.
Yeah, it's most of the stuff I do is stuff that doesn't go in the book.
KAZU, was that the picture you shared with me?
Yeah, do you have that?
I'm going to put that on the screen. Yeah. Go ahead, keep talking, you guys.
So will you have an artist lost edition?
So right now that stack is going to be probably about 4 to 5, maybe about five times that size in the final, maybe more than that. That's just the beginning.
Okay.
So we're just in the first quarter of the book on that. I'm getting towards the. I could see that we're getting towards the halfway point of the book, but yeah, that's actually a little while ago.
Okay. There's a question from our good buddy Joe.
You're crunching.
Mike, can you read that?
Okay. Do you visually thumbnail then, like a visual plan? I guess that feeds into my question I was asking you. Do you?
Yes.
Do you? So you don't write the script, but you draw out a rough.
Yeah. So what I do is I just do rehearsals, and I do. Let's see. What's like the best way? You know what? You guys want me to just do a scene? I can just do it and show you guys, because that's what I'll do if I'm on live with the kids. Here. So,
and so as you're getting set up, I wanted to try to get to some of these questions.
Yeah. Sure.
So this one goes back a little bit about. Hold on. There's a ton of stuff here. Make sure. So David Hatch asks, KAZU, on this Father's Day weekend, how much of your own father-son relationship and your relationship with your children influence how the Amulet storyline progressed?
That's a nice question.
Thanks, David.
Yeah. When I started, I wasn't a dad. I wasn't married. I was a kid, knowing that someday I'm going to be continuing to work on something that I did when I was essentially a kid, and at that point I would be a dad like I am today. So I wanted to make sure that I handed over a good football when I passed it on to me. That was my biggest concern. I did so much. Oh man, my high school comics were super crass and super violent and super. It was just poop jokes and guns, man, all the time. And
that's high school.
I love that stuff. I still,
yeah.
hey, I love that stuff. I had essentially my own version of Milk and Cheese. I was such a huge Evan Dorkin fan, and I still am. And and so I was a huge fan of Evan Dorkin's work in high school. And so I had a couple of characters in Climb and Cabbage where they would just get into trouble all the time. And but yeah, so I was actually asked to do a TV show based on that. I think it was either the Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, and I was like, oh no, I don't know if I could do my high school comics for the rest of my life. I don't think that's gonna be. I don't want to be, because they wanted something like SpongeBob and stuff, and I was like, I love SpongeBob and everything like that, but I wanted to do something that I felt I could grow with, that I can be an adult and still do it. And it
What,
wasn't.
you can't
it's not.
do poop jokes as an adult? What?
Yeah, well, you can do that, but I mean, I wanted to make something that I could share with my grandma at the time, and with my future grandkids and my own kids, and I wanted to have something that had that feeling to it, and so I really had to work hard to get that feeling in my work because I didn't have that naturally. I didn't have a natural instinct to do all ages comics. I see that some people do, and I think that that's pretty neat. And I was not an all ages comics guy, and so I think it probably would have been surprising to a lot of my friends that I would even do that kind of work because of how aggressively crass my early work was. I just wanted to just get a laugh, and then I thought, man, if a person like me who doesn't do any of that at all, I wanted to make like stuff that was like RoboCop, like if a guy like me tries to do the kids comics, I'll bet the kids will love it because they'll sense like that there's this undercurrent of just like punk rockness to the work, even though because the kids don't like to be fed things that they don't have control of, that they feel that it's being fed to them by the parents or the teachers or the librarians and things like that. And teachers and librarians know this too. They don't want to just give them comics that are, basically saying like it's only for kids and nobody else.
Oh, let's go to the kids section. Here you go. You're a kid right here. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, thankfully though, there's tons of really good stuff in there that's actually probably more mature in terms of like the kind of thought, like the what they're talking about philosophically in terms of the conflicts that the characters have. You find some of the best stuff for even the older generations in the kids comics section now, and that's kind of what I've done with Amulet ever since the beginning, was just to like make sure that I'm not making a kids comic book. I'm making a book that kids can read.
Right.
But here, when I started with the Amulet 1, like the first scene was supposed to be kind of an indicator for anybody that this isn't your typical kids comic, because it starts with a pretty dark car accident where somebody dies, like right in on the page, and there's blood and everything, and but it's done, I think, like in the way like a Spielberg film is done. When you see violence in a film like in one of his films, there's a sense that there's purpose to seeing it,
right,
that is not to glorify it, but almost to tell you like this happens in the world.
Yeah.
And
it's not Dawn of the Dead. It's not,
actually, but honestly, and that's actually, I don't know if that's a great example, because I think George Romero does care. I think Romero's films you could show to kids. I think that it was actually the stuff that came off of George Romero's work. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's not like Return of the Dead, is more for the teen 20 set, like the Roger Corman type of work,
Right.
I think Romero was a lot like Wes Craven in that you could show those two kids. I mean, it's hard. It's pretty, difficult horror, but I think there's a humanity to it that if you watch it, it provides the kind of experience that a parent who's watching it with the kids can use to teach them good things. So it's not exploitative, is I guess what I'm saying. A Romero work is, and like a Wes Craven work, like I always thought it was interesting how kids were so into Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. When they were kids, like everybody wanted to dress up as Freddy. It was like the thing to do. And it's like that with Darth Vader, right? Like the kids just like these people, basically people with problems.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take. Yeah.
Even when I would give out comics at Christmas, I mean at Halloween, I would save all my comps over the years, and then I would have to be like, maybe I shouldn't put that one on the pile. And if any kid ever saw me like, Hellblazer or any of that Clive Barker. Oh, you know, they want that. But of course, you know, I can't give a mature audience comic to some kid and have them go home and have their parents get all kicked off at me. But there's that natural curiosity. They want to go for the dark stuff. There's that side. I think the kids know that the world has that. So if you say it's all sugar and spice and, you know, everything's going to be really friendly and no one's going to have a mean face, you know, they don't like that.
Yeah, it's like the old Vault of Horror comics and Tales from the Crypt, right? It just feels like those are all morality tales. I mean, if somebody's learning a lesson pretty harshly.
Right.
And I think the kids kind of sense that. I think that they need to see stuff like that. And that's why, like, the teen horror movies are almost always about people doing wrong. And then they get wronged.
Right, exactly.
Some monster, right? And I think that is it's part of the process of growing, you know, to see people make mistakes on screen so that you don't have to make them yourself.
So do you have that you have that as sort of a guide rail, I guess, for yourself to say, you know, I don't want to overly self-censor, because you get that a lot in children's literature. I know, and just even from doing coloring books and activity books, it's like, oh, don't draw that mean face. We can't have a witch, but she's not a mean witch, you know. And then it's like boring, you know. No kid's gonna go look at that and go, I'm glad they didn't draw that witch with a mean face.
Yeah, I mean, I you know, there's a balance to it all, right? You know, you also don't want to offend the people who are buying the books, who are often parents and teachers. I don't want to make something that just is clearly offensive to everybody.
Right.
I mean, there's a line, right? And you also have to know how much you feel the writer or reader trusts the author. Going back to Spielberg, he has garnered a lot of trust. So if you watch a movie of his, like Saving Private Ryan or Schindler's List, and you see these movies and they're, you know, really violent, like the violence feels violent, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's horrifying. I think, you know, and so and then they show it, and I think people trust that filmmaker to be able to do that. And I would even say Tarantino, people might say that Tarantino like is really bad with violence or whatever, but I actually think he makes violence very horrifying. Like it's nonchalant that it happens in an instant. It's like it's just, you know, and I think that there's something to that. He doesn't glorify violence. He just shocks you with it. And I think that resensitizes you to violence. You don't want violence in your life if you see the violence in those movies, you know?
Sure.
You know, so I think it really depends on how you operate with it, because there are some movies and some comics and things like that clearly don't understand the consequences of violence. So when they put it in there, they're just painting like with a paintbrush. They're just using it to excite the reader, you know? And if people sense that, I think that there's a pushback and they don't like that, you know? But if I think teachers and librarians and people they're very good readers now too. So they'll understand if you're trying to relay an emotion that's really important, that requires showing some kind of violence or something that, you know, typically isn't permissible. I believe that you know, they'll overlook that and, you know, allow you to move forward with all that. There's just certain things though you don't want to put in, things like guns and smoking.
Smoking guns.
Yeah, just for kids comics. I think it's more there's other reasons outside of it's mostly because if it's going into a school setting, you just don't want to have.
So you couldn't have an old sea captain smoking his pipe on his ship?
I have an old sea captain that smokes a pipe on his ship in Amulet 3 and 4. I mean, Enzo's character he's got a pipe on all the time. There's smoke coming out of it. No one's given me a hard time about it, honestly. I'm kind of surprised because apparently Jeff Smith got
for the smoking dragon,
where people were Yeah, because is it because Smiley has a pipe, right?
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and but for some reason, no, not with Enzo, the ship captain with the pipe. I didn't get anybody saying anything about it. I don't know why.
So you're gonna show us a little bit of
Yeah,
your
so I'm gonna draw
process.
something. Yeah, let's. So, the question was about thumbnails, right?
Yeah.
Or okay, so I'm gonna switch to another camera here. Okay.
All right, I'm going to give you the full screen, Kazu.
Okay. All right. All right. Oh, hey, let me close this.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us tonight. We're having a great chat. Um, if you have any more questions, feel free to type them into the comments. I'll do my best to get them on screen. Thanks.
So I typically use when I'm doing this, I don't use a Sharpie like I'm going to, but I'm going to use a Sharpie because it's easier to see. But yeah, when I write a scene, I go through a phase where it's what I call my sketches, but it's not just sketches. It's dialogue, it's notes, and things like that. And so it would look something like this. I would let's see. So I'll just draw. Okay, so I'll draw one of my characters here, and then I usually don't do dialogue bubbles, but we'll do that here just so you know get a good sense of what I'm doing here. So these lines would be dialogue, and I would be writing the dialogue. Okay, so let's say he's talking. So I've got a scene where both of them are discussing something, and so maybe I'll also set the scene, and maybe they're sitting in a park or something like that. Maybe it's a park setting with trees or something. Okay, so here we go. So and then I'll date it. What's today's date?
20th, 6/20.
Okay. We'll just call it park scene. Okay, so this is typically what like a lot of my sketches and things like that will look like, where I'll just do the dialogue. I put the characters in there who are talking. Let me fix something. My camera's trying to. A second.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we go. Hold on a second. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna try to get it from. Oh, come on, StreamYard.
Yeah, it's like pulsating.
Let me get out of here. Yeah, I'm trying to. Okay, here we go.
All right.
All right. Okay, so all right, now it's not pulsating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, so this is kind of how I'll render out a scene. Maybe I need to know what let's say what is what are they doing? Maybe it's like a chessboard or something, and I'll just design the chess pieces, and I just do sketches and things like that, all and put them in this kind of a salad of information.
Mm-hmm.
And I just do this for pages and pages, and it takes me, just about as long as you saw me do it. Like one of these pages could take me about a minute or two, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And I try to draw and write at the speed at which someone will read it. And so I'll do these sketches, do that, and I'll just keep rehearsing it. And I'll do this scene over and over and over again, like, 6 or 7 times. I typically don't do a scene more than twice in a day. I'll draw the scene, and then I'll move on to something else, or think, and then just sit on it until the next day, and then I come back. And so then once I have this, and let's say that this looks good, the dialogue I think feels good, and I think the scene is feeling good to me, then I move on to laying it out and figuring out how I want to present the scene. So let's say this is park scene again. And when I do these, I typically do 4 thumbnail pages. Now I'm taking this and I start thinking about how I want to lay out the scene. And sometimes it's just as random as just laying the boxes down in like a design that I like, and that's what I'm going to start with, because I don't have that much time to think about it here. Mm-hmm. So I used to work in graphic design, and I used to work for architects who are really picky about their graphic design. So I used to do design work for them to help them sell projects. And so they were always really picky about where like gutters and things like that would line up on the page. And I sort of picked that up for my own comics. And so I try to make sure that if I don't want people to like lean over to the right side of their spread here, I try to make sure that that the center gutter has no no exit, So like this gutter's got to run into some side of one of the panels over here. Same with this right there. It's got to stop there. This has got to stop there. It's got to stop here. Mm-hmm. That way, I'm making sure that they're moving from here, down, and then back this way, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll just lay out the whole thing. Let's see.
So you have the layout stage, and then you have a drawing stage, right? So it's almost like you're switching your brain from story to performance, I suppose. Almost in a way.
Just to keep myself from over worrying all of this, I even like say it in my head where I'm doing this, and I think, okay, just draw boxes, just boxes, just draw boxes and fill the boxes, just draw the boxes and fill the boxes, and then because you can get really overly worried about the process, and that can really mess up your comic. So I just tell people, just draw some boxes, just fill the boxes.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think one of the things that's very hard for a lot of people, they get stuck in the beginning. When I teach a class, I teach something that's sort of like what you're doing there. Where I would just have them take an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper and draw 6 panels on it, and just tell them to do what you're doing there. Draw the thing in. It can be very simple. It can be very scribbly. But just to get your story down, get what you want, then the next step is to refine that. Then you know what you're refining, because usually what happens to many people when they start is, like you said, they get worried. They don't really know what they're going to draw. Then they fret over it, and it kind of shuts down their creativity. So they end up with stories that have like big holes in them, and then usually that's one of the things that stops them from ever finishing a page, because it's like, I drew the robot, or I drew the thing that I really like to draw. And then there's all that other stuff I'm not really sure about. And I'm not really sure. And that's been my experience anyway, teaching comics as long as I have, is that there's a lot of people who just get, like you said, they get worried. And then when they get worried, they get stuck.
Yes. Yeah. I like to do like pretty extreme sports. I do a lot of downhill mountain biking and snowboarding, and I often think about. I used to surf a lot too, and I think a lot back. I think about those times where I'm up on the mountain, and I sit there and like if I'm trying to take like one of those huge jumps in the park, and if I sit at the top of the mountain and I wait and I freak myself out about, like, I'm trying to psych myself up, but every minute I'm getting colder and colder while I sit there and wait, and then I'm making my chances of successfully jumping lower as I get colder and more uncomfortable. I know I'm warming. I'm no longer warmed up. I'm not ready for it. I'm becoming less prepared by waiting, and then oftentimes I will feel so unprepared to do it that I'll just skip it all entirely. So I just ended up wasting time anyway. And so that experience I carry over into my comics, and I just think, oh, am I sitting at the top of the hill right now? Why am I just not rolling? You know. And so I try to find ways to, like this, to just be, that's why I use cheap paper, so that I can just feel like this is just garbage. I'm just going to go ahead and just make a bunch of garbage, and then maybe it's good and I'll keep it and it'll be art.
Right.
You know? Right. Not so it's not precious.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that I remind myself that it can't be precious until the final.
Right. Yeah, that's hard. That's another little hurdle for people, because they go, well, I put all that time into it and maybe it's not working. And I said, well, you don't have to tear it up and throw it away. You still have that drawing, and then you just can do another drawing. But that's a hard step for many budding artists to go through, of like, oh man, I just did that splash page, and they may have actually achieved something on that drawing that they didn't achieve before, but then maybe it doesn't work, and you have to be kind of brutal about that sometimes.
And that's another thing where young artists will go, well, I'm not doing this again, and just kind of take the bad parts and just try to claim them, because they don't want to draw it over.
Yeah. No, I was like that though too. So it's like, with kids, if they're already like moving ahead with stuff and they're not worrying like that, I mean, I think they're way ahead of the game. I think that's amazing when I see it. I see it in my son. My son like just kind of jumps in. He just goes and figures stuff out. He's not afraid to make a mistake.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with some other young artists. My friend Denver Jackson has that too. And I think that's it's not like when I look for people who, if I'm looking for a young artists, to join our crew or do some work, that's generally the thing that I'm looking for. Are they willing to just go and just do the thing? Because if they don't have so much anxiety about making the thing, like that will turn, like eventually, but their work is like, let's say it's not very refined and it doesn't look great, but they're still willing to do the work, they're already way ahead of so many people, because eventually the skills are going to be there over time. Right. The skills just show up, with the practice. And if they're willing to keep doing the stuff and just keep going over and over and over again, they're going to be good. There's somebody you can coach into an art position. It's what happened with my colorist, Jason, who, when he started, he didn't know very much about digital coloring, but what I saw in him was his ability to learn and take information and take that on and just go and continue to produce material. And I knew that at some point that would turn him into I think he's the best colorist in the business.
Wow, that's so important. Just the ability to just kind of put your head down and figure it out as you go, versus being frozen.
Yes.
Now, did you have any?
So I don't know what story I'm doing here. I'm just putting an acorn now, and So anyway, this will probably this is probably enough to give you an idea of how I draft things, and then I'll draft this, and it'll take me like 30 minutes, maybe less, maybe 15, 10, maybe even 5 minutes to draft a scene, and then I just put it aside. I just go, okay, go hang out with the family, go think about something else. And then I'll come back the next day and I'll look at it and review. And I go, oh, okay, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. And I do this about 8 to 10 times. And that's how I make my comics.
I want to jump into a couple questions, because how are you doing on time, bro?
I'm good. It's okay. You guys, I'll hang out with you guys until you want me to go.
All right.
I'll be able to make my own burger. I think everybody else has already eaten.
I don't want your cheese to get cold. Our good friend Tim Fielder, who's a fantastic graphic novelist, has two questions, but I'll try to get to the first one first. What's it like personally to do a multi-book epic?
It's great. I think it's nice doing multiple books, honestly, because every time I did a new one, the previous books would help the previous book sell, and so there's like starting a new series like I'm going to in the next one. I feel like I'm going to have to be a lot faster again. I'm going to have to be like I was on Amulet at the beginning, where I had to like get some volumes out there so that people aren't just stuck with just one volume. And I'm cognizant of how that's going to be. It's going to be pretty difficult. But my kids are growing up, and they can do a lot more on their own now. So I'm not as, I don't need to be there with them holding their hands with stuff as much as I used to. So it's actually a pretty good time for me to make that transition after Amulet 9. Now, when you get towards the end of the series, I feel like it's been beneficial to have more time between the books. Partly because you're closing out the series and you're thinking about all of the things, the threads that you've created, and you got to close it down and close it up. That's actually a lot harder than opening up the doors. The opening the doors that's fun, but then you're gonna have to deal with it later. So you've made a promise to yourself, or you made a promise to the reader that you have to fulfill later on. Once you've opened each door, you got to close one, close that door somehow, because that's how you're going to come to the end of the series. So it's wonderful once you're it's wonderful to be able to build up one thing, like a big one single thing. And I'll tell you how it feels to not be doing that after I start something else. Maybe I'll just miss it. I don't know. It's been great.
Then a follow-up, Tracy asked,
Hey,
did you think Amulet would be 9 books? That seems long. How long did you think it originally would be?
Yeah, if I thought it was going to be 9 books, I would never have done it. There's no way.
Thanks, Tracy.
If someone told me that there's just no way, it would have been too daunting. I would have said, "Oh, I better go make a movie or something instead." It just evolved into that. But now, like that I've done the whole thing, I feel comfortable doing another one where I did 9 or more books. I would be comfortable with it. So Amulet sort of just kind of led me into 9 books, and I chose 9 at the end. Like while I was doing, I was working on book 5, 6, 7. I chose 9 to be the end because I wanted it to match Bone. I feel like it's so related to Bone. I mean, it's like it's like a little cousin. Like Amulet's the little cousin of Bone. I mean, Bone, was really the first one to open the door here at Graphics, and I don't want to push Jeff off the shelf. So I want Amulet and Bone to like hang out, like A and B right there, just hanging out on the shelf and together for years and years, and that would be great. So I actually didn't want to like make it like one piece where it dominates an entire a whole wing of the store. So there was, but at the same time, I think the multiple books thing, that was something that David Saylor at Scholastic was encouraging me to do. He wanted to make it a bigger series than I intended. My original intention was it was going to be 1 book. They split it into 2, so it became 2 books. And then once I was done with 2, I thought, there's no way this is the end. There's just so much stuff to cover. So I said, we'll do 5. And then as I was getting towards 5, I was like, there's no way I can finish this. I need 2 more. I'm going to do 7. And by the time I was at 7, I was like, okay, 9 is the end. And I'm going to end it at 9. But, and so I had to be proactive about it because it could have gone on forever.
they had to do a hard stop, right? 9 is it.
Yeah, I just want it to
And,
be remembered. I just
yeah,
don't want it to. Manga is hard to remember, except for
mm,
the characters. Like you
yeah,
think of Dragon Ball and One Piece and Naruto, but you don't know like, hey, oh man, like One Piece Volume 47 was the
right,
one. It's like you just don't.
right.
It's hard to remember that stuff. You just remember the idea of it, and then they just have too much content.
Here's another one, Kazu. Alejandro says, "You seem to be a guy who, from youth, was really thinking decades ahead, listening to elders, thinking of what projects to take. It's very unusual. How has that quality helped or sometimes hindered your career?" Thanks, Alejandro.
It's always it's to me. I've always felt it's helped, never hindered. I think the perception around people around me is that it's probably hindering me. They're like, "Why is he so slow at this decision?
Mm,
He's like so fast at drawing. Why does he decide to do this? Why isn't he doing what the market asks?" And
mm,
I don't react to things. I don't react to the market. And part of this is actually not from older folks. Well, older folks, and part of it's from baseball. I tell people like baseball really helped me figure out how to do a lot of this stuff because of the discipline that's required to play the game. It's there's so much interesting stuff with the game itself. The fact that only 5 or 6 minutes of play actually occurs during every game. You're going to be watching a game that's like 3 something hours long, but almost everything happens in the minds of the players. The whole game is like a chess game that's occurring, either between the pitcher and the batter, and then the pitcher and defense. You know, if you think about it, so little happens in baseball, which makes it one of the best sports to sell hot dogs at, because you can go and take a take a break and buy the food. That's why it's such a. I think that's why it's such a successful sport. And so but in baseball, one thing I learned was to play on as a defender, as a defense. I was a shortstop, and I knew that I had to play on my toes and not my heels. And then by that I mean I'm always on my toes, and when the ball is hit a certain place, I've already mapped it out in my head where I was going to go. I get there and I try to do my best to make that play happen. If I can't, it's an error or something goes wrong. But I just enact the plan that's already been in my head. By playing on my heels, that would be I just wait for I seeing the ball happen, the ball gets hit, and now I'm on my heels, and I'm at the mercy of whatever the batter had put in front of me. So now I'm reacting to the play. And I think about that a lot with my art. I always think, am I reacting to what I think the market wants?
mm,
If I
mm,
am, then I'm on my heels, and the ball's in play, and I'm at the mercy of the batter or whatever chaos is occurring. If I'm on my toes, then I've already made the plan. So I'm already going to do it regardless of what happens. I'm just instituting the plan that I had and hoping that it works out. And usually it does, and almost always does. So I think about that too. It's not just elders. It was just processing the process of playing baseball or any
mm,
sport, anything that requires some form of discipline. And I'd studied a ton. I studied Disney. I studied how did Walt Disney do all this? Like, how did James Cameron do all of that? Like, how did he do, what he does with his films? And I just studied that, and I try to apply it to what I'm doing. And I study chefs. I'll study musicians and anybody who does anything. You can find that. So my teachers are everywhere. They're the world. In fact, one of the best teachers I've ever had is my little brother, because he's so wise and he's so smart and he's so good at everything. And I was always kind of second best at everything because he was so good at everything. Now he's he's just this, he's a brilliant engineer for Boeing. Works on their space program. And so I look up to him all the time. So having someone like that around, I mean, I didn't need any old wise men around. I had my young wise dude, always teasing me, always 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 making fun of me. I had him around. That's all I needed.
That's great. Mike, were you going to? I hope I didn't cut you off. Were you going to say something?
I was just wondering if, talking about your process, is there stuff that you would go back and change now on the original books? Is there stuff that you would like to go back and revisit and say, oh, you know what? I wouldn't have done that. I would have done this.
I often think that that Amulet 3 was the only book I delivered on time. And I feel like I did rush some stuff, and I wish I hadn't done it the way I had. However, ever since then, I've kind of been trying to work to sort of correct those mistakes, and they've turned into new storylines. So I don't know if, the cause and effect thing there is there. Maybe what I perceive as a mistake wasn't a mistake at all. Perhaps that is the reason why it's successful. It could very well be the case. And if I look at just sales numbers, Amulet 3, I believe, is possibly the best-selling book in the series outside of number 1. Number 3 is the most popular in the series, and it's the one that I keep looking at as being the one that I messed up on. So it's hard to say. I just don't. I try not to regret anything. I just try to think ahead and institute my plan, just like I said with the baseball stuff. Just do the thing that I had, set out to do. Do it to the best of my ability, and try not to regret any of those decisions. And so I wouldn't change anything right now. No. Maybe the using the font that I didn't have on Amulet 1. I did that. I hand lettered that whole thing. I may someday go back and put the font in there to make it consistent.
Right. Did you have any as far as drawing styles and influences, did you decide that you wanted to work in a simpler style for the characters versus the backgrounds, which is sort of an animation thing, because even Miyazaki's backgrounds in his comics are more detailed than the characters? And did you have any, design philosophy when it came to making characters and drawing expressions? Because that's every cartoonist, even though we all have many of the same root influences, we all end up having sort of our own personal blend of iconographic use of expressions. Like you might have a surprise expression that somebody else doesn't have that becomes like a touch tone for you. Like we all know you can think of, if I say Charles Schultz, you get an image in your head, right? Of Charlie Brown getting tumbled over, or Snoopy yelling, or his lettering. There's very personal things to the great strip. So I wondered if you had any thoughts, or you did some work on that before you started.
Yeah, I did. That's a good question. It was really hard for me to switch to the way I draw now. I actually didn't draw characters with pupils. For a long time, I was drawing superhero comics, and everybody had no pupils for a while. I mean, it's just, and it seemed weird to even draw them in, for a little while. Now I look back at those drawings and I think, wow, that's so weird. It's in the 90s, everybody had white, just lights for eyes, and there were no pupils in the superheroes. Right? Is that still going on? I don't think it is. But looking, because I was looking at Jim Lee's work, and Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, everybody was doing everybody had just nothing but white in the eyes. So I started doing that too. And then later I did copper, which is the super round eyes, Simpsons style or something, or Family Guy. And I hated drawing circles. I think everybody. I just couldn't stand drawing them. I couldn't stand drawing Copper at his face. I was like, oh my goodness, here we go. I got to draw his face again. And I tell my friends, actually my friends used to make fun of it because they used to try to draw Copper, and because his face is just full of circles, it never comes out right. Everyone draws a wonky Copper, and it's one of the hardest things to do. And so So after Copper, I knew I'm not putting any circles in any of my characters. On them, there's nothing but ellipses and triangles and angular lines, and everything's got to be swooshy. So I did think about that because I wanted to make it fun for me to draw. It's fun to draw gesture, like just moving things around, movement, and it's easier to move a gesture like a person who has like fluid gestures.
Right.
So I needed to design that into it. As far as the faces go, I wanted to be more like a Miyazaki comic or a movie like that. So it's not quite anime, but it's like somewhere between like Miyazaki and Disney. Just
right.
Very simple, expressive eyes. And I was looking at Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. And for so long when I was a kid, I was around older artists who would tell me, "Oh, you got to stop drawing the cartoons. You got to do real art." Right? I had that.
Mm-hmm.
I had that all the time, and it was like,
Yeah.
We love the cartoons, but can you really draw? Can you like draw for real? And I'm like, well, why is it that even though so I'll do the nice drawing of a flower pot or something, and they're like, "Wow, that's real," and I'm like, you could have gotten something like a camera to do a better job than what I just did there. And I was like, why is it that I feel that the cartoons are really, really important? Mm-hmm. And as you guys have probably read Understanding Comics, it was the very first time, let me pull that.
And guys, we're going to start wrapping with KAZU soon, so if you have any last questions, try to get them in. No guarantee I'll get to them.
I don't have... Oh, wait, it's up here.
But,
right.
Go ahead.
So in Understanding Comics, let me see if I can find it quickly, but there's just that one part where he talks about how you identify with the cartoon in a way that, you don't with rendered objects. Because you see yourself, you see the face.
That's like the iconography chapter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that, this thing.
Right.
Where you relate more to the little icon face. You relate more to that than to the rendered face. Right. So, and I saw that finally, and I was in college when I read this, and I just thought, oh man, that's true. So the reason I like the cartoons is that it puts you in the work. And I still love rendered images, and that's something that you look at through the work. So I just thought, well, what I'll do is I'll make these characters that are very simple, and keep them simple and easy to draw and fun to draw, and then put them in super realistically rendered situations. As a kid, I used to love Muppet Babies. And watching Kermit and Piggy and Gonzo and everybody go on, and Fozzie go on these journeys, and like I remember the Indiana Jones one in particular, where they would be like in the mine carts. They're pretending to be in these movies, and as a kid, it was so appealing to me to watch cartoons go into this other reality. And I thought, like, man, it felt like I was going there with them. And so I designed the way Amulet looks and feels on that principle, which is why we have the painted backgrounds and everything like that. But the characters, like now, we've over the course of the series, we've actually dialed down the amount of rendering that we would allow on the face. And so we don't put highlights as much. We used to put highlights on there, and now Jason and I would just realize it just works better without anything. It's like a plate. Just keep it. Like it's just you got to see the face very clearly.
Right. Keep it clean,
and you don't even want to render. Yeah, like you don't want it if the character's even in a dark room, I still bring up the color of the face because I want that icon to be there.
Yeah,
so
you can even see that on Milton Caniff when he was doing stuff. The chiaroscuro he would use, he would not put on the people's faces. It would be maybe on the side of the head or the body or the shirt or the background, but the face always read real clear.
Yeah, it's really important. Yeah, if you put shadows across it, you're cutting the face, and you're giving them just half of it, and that might be good for mood. Maybe that's what you're looking for. But every time you start doing that, you're actually making it so that the reader identifies less with that person. So if you want to make that person look more like an object and less like a person, then put all sorts of stuff on their face. Like so, yeah. Like my villains when they show up, I don't really have true villains in my book. Nobody's really a bad guy in Amulet. But when they first show up, they're often overly rendered and they have more wrinkles and there's a lot more to their face so that you don't identify with them. You see them as the other. And as the story goes on, I eliminate a lot of the detail and make it more iconic. And you are now they're with you now. You empathize with them and you see yourself in them over time. And I hope that that's like a powerful thing that's happening with the comics is that people learn to empathize with people who don't look like them or look or they originally judged them based on the characteristics that they see drawn on them and then later on see them as just another person that's just like themselves. And so I think there's writing in that too. Like you can write with it's like poetry with just the design language is huge in comics. That's one of the things I love about it is that you could use graphic design for storytelling. In fact, I would argue that there's much more graphic design going on than illustration in comics, just in general. That's actually what we're using design more than illustration to tell our stories.
Yeah,
illustration work was more garnish, or like it's like additional stuff. Because if I look at Diary of a Wimpy Kid or even Peanuts and things like that, it's you don't want to see those more rendered.
What, you don't want to see Captain Underpants with really highly rendered underpants?
Yeah, no, you don't. No, it's just perfect as it is. And right. Dogman, I mean, there's a reason why it's so popular.
Well, I think that there was a line that came out of the strips where you had the realistic strips like Prince Valiant and Flash Gordon and that kind of stuff, and then you had the cartoony or the Bigfoot, they used to call the Bigfoot stuff. And both those went into Europe and went over to Japan and places. And then they sort of ran with the Bigfoot stuff. Where in comic books, that kind of died out, at least in the direct market, let's say since the 70s. You saw less and less cartoony stuff and more realistic stuff. So that audience, and I remember reading your thing. So like I used to like Cartoons magazine myself. So you had Cartoons, and I lived to love Mad Magazine, which was like right in the middle because you had guys like Drucker who were kind of little. There was a lot of realism in his cartooniness, or people like Wally Wood. And when I would get the reprints, but then you also had like Don Martin, who was just completely cartoony, and you got that mix. But it seems like the kids that are reading the anime or the manga that's probably the majority of them are in your audience are also reading that stuff. They're not reading the rendered stuff. They're reading more because even most of the manga is not that rendered. I mean, a few things were. Yeah. A few things
I mean, it depends. There's some of it's like super rendered.
Right.
There's a tradition of that too. That's
right. Like Crying Freeman and all that kind of stuff. But the most popular stuff, it seems like it's the stuff that's not the most highly. It's more cartoony, for lack of a better term. It
definitely
seems
amongst the younger readers.
Yeah,
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's going to the shelf again.
So do you think there's a stepping stone? There's a stepping stone.
Wait, what are you holding up?
You seen this Tips from the Trop Cartoonist? So
no.
This is the book my godparents gave me when I was young, and I think I used this. I studied this book more than any other.
Who's it by?
This volume right here. It was actually a Caps book. It was Don Christensen, I think, put it together. Yeah, Don Christensen was the publisher. You got more Drucker in here. You got Sergio. It's all the Caps guys, and women as well. You got Bill Keane in here too. But yeah, it was. Let me see. Where's Mort Drucker's pages? Yeah. So even though and what I loved about Mort Drucker's stuff is that it's even though it's realistically rendered, I mean, he's got such a good sense of the icon of each person's face. Like he's so his caricatures are just out of this world, you know. And they don't look real. That's the thing is they look more real than real. If that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
You know. So I used to study that stuff and used to draw like Mort Drucker when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, yeah, I did too. I used to copy his stuff all the time. I used to love his stuff as a kid. But it was funny because I think you got a lot of cross pollination of in that time, where now it's sort of more typical, I think, for people to sort of like see one kind of comic. Like you just like the manga and you just see more manga. You don't by accident get something tossed in, which you would get in something like Mad. You would get such a variety of cartooning in one magazine. It's not as typical now to see a variety of styles in one, except for like Flight, things like that.
Yeah. So I think it's just a matter of finding that, because I think, you know, I think with the Caps group, I mean, they're hanging out not because they want to draw like each other. I think they just hang out because they're friends, you know. And so they all have very varied styles. And I think when young people are just looking for stuff all the time, they don't have a lot of friends around them that have different styles and things like that. So like the way they draw, if they draw like very similarly, like you were saying, whether it's a Steven Universe type style or a manga aesthetic, I think that they're like, it's more of a social thing where it's like trying to be part of a group of other artists that they don't know yet, that they would like to know. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that there's an identity thing that's going on with that. When I see that drawing, I sometimes think, this is somebody who wants to be friends with, to see if other people like things that they like. So they are trying to make it similar because they're trying to connect with each other. You know, so when I see it, I don't think of it as being comparable to, you know, like something like this, where, you know, these are all people who make a great living doing this. And so, you know, and then collected in this book, and, you know, we're very fortunate to have something like this. And Flight, you know, occurred as well. But I mean, if someone were to do it right now, to make a book like this, a book where they won't make any money doing it because it's an anthology, they're going to have to do it for the love. I'm sure that if I had to do it right now, I'm sure I could find a whole lot of new talent that looks nothing like each other. But I'd have to go from industry to industry, different places, just like with Flight. There were people who were from the independent comics group, from the web comics group. There were people who were web comics people. There were drawing board people like Enrico and Jake Parker. None of those folks knew each other or even knew they existed. I just brought, the only reason that they were connected is that they knew that I knew them. And I was just going to all these different places, and I just thought, well, you know what? Why don't we have a big, you know, different, like a very varied, like a variety of artistic talent that are essentially kind of the same age, and see that here's a snapshot of all the different types of storytellers you might see. And so most of them ended up, you know, coming from and going back to animation.
Yeah, it was funny when I went from comics into animation. I meet all these people in animation that love comics, right? And they want to do comics. And so there's a lot of this like cross. The people in comics want to do animation, and the people in animation want to do comics. It's like, and we all love the same stuff. You know what I mean? It's amazing.
Yeah, the grass is greener, I guess.
Yeah,
elsewhere, and I've just always seen it as different patches of grass. It's all grass.
KAZU, I want to start wrapping you, but there's maybe one or two more questions. There's one kind of like overarching question that people keep asking, and rather than keep clicking on people's faces, there's a lot of questions in the room about, do you foresee AMULET going to feature or animation or something like that? And if so, who would be the voices? Who owns it? You know, down that line. So if there's anything you'd like to answer or not answer, that's totally cool with us.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as far as the public information goes, what you'll find is that it was optioned by 20th Century Fox a number of years ago through Temple Hill Productions, and they did the Twilight movies and the Maze Runner and things like that. And they've been really nice to work with. The producer Pete Harris is a friend of mine. I would consider him a friend now, and we just go back and forth talking about this and that. Movies are difficult because it's kind of like surfing a giant wave, and everything just has to kind of magically come together, and almost everybody's surprised when it does. So and so it's a kind of a waiting game, I suppose. There's been multiple screenwriters hired to work on it, and this is like it's been a long journey. It was originally optioned by Akiva Goldsman a long time ago as the producer of all of Ron Howard's movies, and then from there, after Akiva Goldsman had it, Will Smith found it, I think, in Akiva Goldsman's lobby, like in his waiting room, and then Will Smith optioned it for Warner Brothers. So I worked with Will Smith and his family. So Will and Jada and his kids. It was supposed to be a feature for their kids, and so I worked with them for years. Mostly with Jada's brother Caleb, and Gary Glushon was the producer there at Overbrook Entertainment, their company. And then so for a long time we were working on trying to get Amulet made, and then Willow, their daughter, decided to quit acting, which I thought was a pretty wise decision. I thought it was really great that she decided to focus on just being a kid for a while and just growing up instead of going into the same business. I thought that was wise. She's wise behind her years. I thought that was one fantastic decision. Well, the rights came back to me, and then it went back out to Fox, and then Fox got bought by Disney. So now I guess it's a Disney. I don't know. So now here I am back at Disney. It wasn't really my choice to be there. I don't mind. I mean, I like Disney stuff, and I hope that and none of the same people that I talked to back in days that I was there are there anymore. So it's a whole different group of people, top to bottom. There's like nobody that's the same, and so that's where it's at. I don't know if I'm really not concerned if it's a movie or not. I'm focused on the books and my readers. I think they'd like to see a movie, but it's not something that everyone's like pining for, I think, because part of what I'm trying to do too is get people to want to read and enjoy content that's created by fewer creators. Not because I like books better than movies. I love movies, absolutely love movies, but because it would be nice to have more media that has less noise attached to it, less marketing attached to it, just more human interaction, one-on-one, like maybe just 2 or 3 or 4 people talking, as opposed to making something that's between several hundred people where everyone has to decide on what is said. And I think that that's the reason why I think movie studios look to things like comics, because when we're in where we are, it's quieter, so you can hear the talking, and so they can take that talking and they turn it into a big production. Because like when you're doing it work over there, it's just too noisy. There's so much going on. Everyone's reacting. Everyone's on their back foot. Like I'm talking about, nobody's on their toes. They're on their back foot. Everyone's just reacting to everything that's going on all the time because it's too much. There's so much money.
Right.
There's so much activity. It's so noisy. And so I prefer like a lot more artists and writers to try taking the risk of making something quieter, because I think people could use that in days like today, like the days that we're seeing right now, to hear from just 1 or 2 people, like a real human being. It almost feels like I feel the world like a lot like young people rebelling against all of the manufactured messaging, and just like the fact that they just want something human. They want to hear just somebody say something and it sounds like something they recognize. So I'm not, I when I get these questions about the movie, I mean, it's great, whatever. If they make a movie, it's great. And I'll be happy about it, and hope. I told Pete, producer, my biggest concern, I just want to make sure that the set is a good one, where people are safe and taken care of. And I told him, like, I honestly don't care if the movie is garbage. Like if it comes out like not good, if it's a crappy movie, I'll still love it if it was made with love. If it was made with a care for the people who work on it, I'll love it, even if it sucks.
I love it.
Because if they make something good and they've harmed people along the way, I will hate it to the day I die. So that's that was my spiel on that. So, you can do whatever they want. Just want to make sure that it's done with love and care, and they're taking care of people instead of hurting them. That's all. So I mean, and that's like kind of goes back to the books. I mean, that's why I do the books, and I'm not in Hollywood. I didn't really care about. I don't care about the lights and stuff. And honestly, for a while, all I wanted was to have a movie done where I could take my grandma to a premiere. That was actually the whole goal of it. Honestly, to get back to it, that was the reason why I wanted a movie made. My grandma passed not long ago, just very recently, and so that's not going to happen anymore. So I honestly don't care if they make a movie or not.
All right,
So,
Kazu.
yeah.
Last question, and then we'll let you get to your cold hamburger.
Okay, yeah.
Hello, Kazu. What would you say to someone who wants to be like you, creating your own graphic novels for a living in the next 10 years? I've finished 2 graphic novels already. What's next?
Well, you just gotta
So,
keep making them until Oh wait,
yeah.
go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
I was just setting you up for the question. So, what's your answer?
I mean, yeah, 2 graphic novels is great. I think you just kind of have to keep rolling with it. And if it's something that, if you'll do it regardless of whether or not there's any money, you're going to be in a good position. Because, you know, I think creative control. I used to think creative control was a reward, and like something that you gain from being good. And I realized that you actually can choose to have creative control early on. Losing creative control is something that you're giving up, and you take money for it. Let's say that's kind of what happens over time. So what I'd like to see more people do, like artists and young artists that are starting right now, is to maintain as much creative control as they can, and not just for yourself, but for your audience too. Going back to what I was saying, like drowning, like people are drowning in noise these days. There's so much stuff, so much produced noise happening all the time. It would be really great to see more and more people have a very human voice with their work. And I will guarantee you that if you get your stuff out there and it feels real and human and like a real person did it, there's going to be an audience for it. And it doesn't matter what it looks like. It just has to be out there and has to be made. So you don't have to draw really, really well. You don't have to write really, really well. You just have to be a really good, honest person, and you got to present yourself right and in that way, and not try to sell to whatever the winds are telling you to sell to. And you'll find success of some kind, whether it's just maybe with 1 or 2 people who just read it and go, "This changed my life." That probably will happen, and then, or maybe it'll be a huge hit, and then you'll have new problems to think about. Success is not
more money,
it's a
more
responsibility.
problems. More money, more problems. That's true.
More money are different problems. I think the problems change. If you don't have any money, you can't eat. That's not good either. That's a different problem to have. But once you have a lot of responsibility, then those are new problems that you might not be prepared for. So.
Yeah, I remember talking to a girl who dated one of the guys who created the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles. And she said in the beginning, like the first couple of years, all the money they were making, all this was like all going to lawyers, and people were suing them and saying, "I rode the school bus with you when you were in 3rd grade, and I said Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtle, and you stole it from me." And so, yeah. And Hollywood is probably the biggest example of people who have people kissing their butt every day, giving them everything they want, making a lot of money. And so many of those people are actually really miserable people in their own personal lives.
It can happen. Yeah, it can definitely happen. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think, you definitely don't need money to find happiness. I'll say that. but if you're ready for the responsibility, I would encourage people who have a sense of social responsibility, who like taking care of a lot of people, and don't mind being in the limelight, doing a lot of work. I'd say go for it. Please make graphic novels. I would love to see them. And when I meet people like Jeff Kinney and Dave Pilkey, who I look at as leaders in my field, I can tell that they're very happy to see somebody else come in with with an even keeled, serious mindset, who's looking to make the field better. See if to make it a better place for everybody around. If you're that kind of person, please do this. Please make graphic novels. And don't give up on it. Don't go into engineering and all that stuff. I mean, you can do that, but if you have the skill and talent to make comics, you should come back to it, and because it's really, really important. And you'll see the value once you start really pushing it out there.
So Elon Musk now that he's been putting stuff in space and everything, he should start making those graphic novels.
He can, yeah. I mean, I guess he can do whatever he wants.
Right.
All right, KAZU. Last things. We're going to get you out of here. So the question keeps coming up: when is number 9 going to hit the streets?
Yeah, I can't answer. I can't. I'm not allowed to answer that.
There you go. That's a great answer.
But I'm working on it. Yes, I'm working on it. Working hard on it. I was working on it just before this, and I'm going to work on it right after this. So, after I eat my hamburger.
And just to talk about connecting with people, a good friend of mine, Lori Wallace Kesselman, says, I teach reluctant middle school readers, and this is a favorite series for many of them. You've gotten non-readers to love books. Thank you so much.
That's great. Yeah, that's what I love it. That's the biggest part of my job. Getting reluctant readers reading.
And thank you so much for being with us, Mike. Did you have any wrap up before we send?
I just wanted to say, when people are looking to contact you, go to your Twitter. That's where you're.
You can go to my website. You can go to boltcityproductions.com. You can go to my Twitter at Bolt City. So I'm easy to find. You can find me online on my website. So I'm just hanging out on Instagram and Twitter. So yeah, go to
Well, it was great to actually see you after 30 years. Yeah.
It was like a decade.
It was decades. Yeah.
And
so
this has been a really great.
On.
Thank you. Thanks for being on. I hope we can have you back soon.
Sure.
Maybe when everything's said and done and you're doing your press junket for 9, we can maybe have you back.
Sure.
On.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'd be happy to.
All right. Well, thank you so much, because you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Enjoy your Father's Day.
Father's Day is coming up. That's right.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day. And we'll hope to speak to you soon. Thank you so much, man. You have a great night.
All right.
Good night.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. All right. I kicked him out. Bye, KAZU. That was great. And thank you for all the new listeners and viewers out there for joining us. Every Wednesday and Saturday, we come in with some really great content with great creators. Like we said, KAZU's a New York Times bestselling author. We have kind of less like AAA+ people on here all the time. And I think when we're talking to other creatives that are at such a high tier in their respective fields, I think you get a really good outlook on what it takes to get there and stay there. I don't know. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yes. Yeah. I think one of the goals we often talked about with the podcast was to really try to show a cross section of the various artists doing all kinds of things in the field of cartooning, and to try to get them to tell a little bit of their stories to the the teenage versions of us when we were 16, 17, 13. Like when I was 13, I decided I wanted to draw comics. So I think what he said is 100% true. If you want to do it, do it. That's the way to learn how to do it. That's the way you will find a way to make a living at this if you keep doing it.
That's really true. And really, one of the funniest things for me, Mike, is how quickly the time flies. And even to speak to what KAZU said, like, I think we all kind of started, whatever your class was when you first got into the business. And there's a lot of people that you started with that aren't here anymore. And I think there's really something to be said about continuing to hit the wall with the pickaxe, and you got to keep digging and keep digging. And if you don't give up, the diamonds are going to be closer to you than if you stop.
Yeah. And everybody goes through those struggles where it's hard. You feel down, you get down, you feel depressed, you feel like the muse isn't in the room, and I know that I go through that on a weekly basis. Not every day do I feel like, I draw every day. I draw for many hours every day. I love drawing, but there are days where it's a job. You got to force yourself to sit down in the seat and produce. And that there's a lot of, butt in the seat doing it that really pays off. I think a lot of people feel like, oh, that person was so talented. They had some magical skill. They had a magical pencil. I can tell you almost universally, I have never, even the most talented people I know are the people who work the most. They're sit there every day and they do it every day. And it's not some magical talent. It's actual just sitting there and being consistent. So if you are listening to us on the YouTube channel, please do us a favor and subscribe before you log off tonight. We really appreciate that. We'd also like to thank KAZU again and both of our sponsors. Jamar, there we go.
Good morning.
You're crunching again. So again, I use Clip Studio Paint every day. I was using it earlier today. I'll be using it tonight when I do the Judge Parker newspaper strip. I draw, and the last couple of weeks I've actually been inking the Phantom. So I love it. It's a great program. And so I haven't even plumbed the depths of the program because I'm so used to just using it for the way that I want to work. But I see people doing all kinds of like amazing stuff that I would like to learn to do. And to also thank our new sponsor, Tomorrow's Publishing, tomorrows.com. And you can go over there and you can get all kinds of great deals and bargains on all of their publications right now. I think you said he was having a 50% off, or was it 40% off?
I think it's 40% off.
40%.
And over at Clip Studio Paint, they're having a 50% off sale on software.
90% off this weekend. Between 90% off.
They're slashing prices.
Right, they're slashing prices.
So also, I just want to give a quick shout out to our buddy Tom Zoller. We had a really great talk with him last Wednesday. I've heard some good feedback from the episode, and Tom's always he's a good sport and a great resource. He's
a good egg, as they say.
And also, Mike, I feel generous. I think I'm going to push ahead and tell you who's going to come up in the next couple of days. I'm excited.
Okay.
All right. So on
drum roll.
Next Wednesday, the 24th, we're going to have the spectacular cartoonist Craig Rousseau is going to be on the podcast. I'm a big fan of Craig's. And Craig is kind of like a lot of us, Mike, and he reminds me of you in a way. He's a drawing machine. Every 5 seconds, he's posting a new drawing he just did.
What do you mean by that? I resent that remark.
Craig's a drawing robot. And then I'm going to give a spoiler on Saturday the 27th. We're going to have Brian Lee O'Malley on the podcast. That's right. Scott Pilgrim creator Brian Lee O'Malley is going to be on the program with us. I'm very excited about that also. And we're going to close out the month with some more people. I'm not going to tell you yet. You'll just have to wait till next. You'll have to wait till Wednesday. But this only gets better if you signal boost, right? We're in a lot of different formats right now, and we're starting to slowly get a rumble. I'm starting to feel the earth move a little bit, Mike. And we can only get further and better with your help. So if you're loving what we're doing, tell your people. All of you guys have constituents. Just say, hey, you know what?
Constituents. You know,
I've been listening to this great podcast here. Why don't you check it out? Right? It doesn't cost you anything to share, right? So yeah, I'm very excited about that. So Mike, any final words before we close this out?
I don't know if I have any final words. Maybe final drawings. Final drawings. No, please, like Jamar said, every person who subscribes to our podcast and spreads it is really appreciated. And we also love to hear back from you. So any cards or letters, as they used to say in the old days, we really appreciate the feedback. We really appreciate answering questions. If there's other guests you would like to see, please suggest them.
Mm-hmm.
And we're always looking to add more people to our roster. Eternal.
Oh, hold on, hit my Kirby hands.
The roster eternal.
Yes, I love it. All right, guys. So I think we had a really great session tonight. We're going to wrap it up. I know we both have to get back to the drawing board. So again, I am Jamar Nicholas. And for my best bud, Mike Manley, we're going to sign off. You have a great night, and we'll see you back here on
Wednesday.
All right. Thanks a lot, and don't forget to wash your hands. Have a good night.